Welcome in to another episode of WBOA Courtside. Today, we're going to learn from a legal mind, and he is a basketball official. Jeff Lewis joins us on the podcast. Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Jeff is a 26-year basketball official. He's worked 22 of those 26 years officiating small college basketball in Wisconsin and the Midwest. And he's worked 8 years at the Division I level. Jeff has officiated 8 WIA state basketball tournaments, and he is an 8-year high school football official. In this November, he worked his first state championship game. He also worked the 2018 NCAA Division III Final Four. Jeff also has a legal background, as we indicated, and we'll dive into a little bit about that. But Jeff, before we begin, for our listeners who may not know your backstory, how did you first pick up a whistle?
First of all, thanks for having me here. My story, I feel like, is very similar to everyone else's, but I started out in 8th grade. I had a neighbor who worked for the Franklin Rec Department in Franklin, Wisconsin, and basically said, hey, we can get you $5.15 an hour if you want to work second and third grade rec games on Saturday mornings before my own basketball practices. So 3 buddies and I just started doing it at a local elementary school. So I just progressed from there. But yeah, it was minimum wage. Pretty sure it was $5.15 an hour. Key whistles. That's when we started out.
When you think back to those early years, you progressed relatively quickly as a younger official. What helped you get comfortable with the rule book instead of feeling overwhelmed by it?
A lot of it was more of the challenge. The first time you're challenged or someone asks you a question and you don't have the right answer, it kind of puts you in that uncomfortable zone, which I can pinpoint 2 or 3 times where if I would have had the right answer in a situation, I could have gotten out of it unscathed and looked like, the knowledgeable referee that everyone strives to be. A couple situations like that early on in my career, one while working rec basketball, where not knowing the rule prevented you from having an educated response with a coach or whoever was asking you a question. Diving into the rule book, one, it's an arduous task, right? Because you're looking at the rule book of the 100 and some pages, the case book, and trying to feel comfortable in that space is really hard. But I think having the drive or the interest, the curiosity to open the rule book is the first step, and then obviously taking on the obligations and the requirements of this avocation are going to force you to know the rules. I can look back to 2 instances for sure of not knowing the rules or not knowing how to respond as the building blocks for me to say, I'm going to pick up the rule book and know that answer next time. As I've progressed with school, with career, with my job, it comes hand in hand with what I do day to day is knowing the regulations, knowing the gray. So I've kind of rested, for better or worse on that position of saying I'm going to be really good at knowing the rules or knowing the difference in 2 different scenarios, which has, I think, benefited me and definitely been a factor in how quickly I've progressed through the ranks, but there's detriments to that as well, right? You're coming up, you think you're supposed to be somewhere and you get put in an uncomfortable position, and really looking back, you had a lot to learn. And that happened, 2, 3, 4 times in my career where I thought I should be working some game in some league, and looking back, I wasn't ready at that time. But that's just the course of your basketball career. But you're right, Josh. Getting into the rule book it's a tough task. It's a steep learning curve. It's a tall mountain, whatever analogy you want to use. But the first step is opening the page, right? You can only go page by page. And so you take baby steps, and it truly is a way to help you solidify that foundation and rules knowledge.
Jeff, as you said, you come from a legal background where interpreting language and precedent is key. How has that shaped the way you study and apply the basketball rule book?
The one thing with basketball, and everyone you talk to, for so many years was talking about the art versus the science of officiating. You have to have some feel, you have to have some game management skills. And then it turned into, you really need to know the rules. We have videotape. If you screw up a rule, it's going to show on tape. You had to beat the tape. And a lot of these different philosophies over the years, where now a lot of guys are resting again on art versus science. And you do have to know the rule, but you still have to know how to talk to people. That progression in kind of officiating philosophy is something that I look in the legal profession, and it is so similar. You have to know the law, and you have to be able to opine and provide input, but you still have to have the ability to massage a situation. And so when I look at the 2 positions side by side, they are so ridiculously similar that definitely have benefited from officiating in my day-to-day job. And my day-to-day job has definitely benefited me in officiating on a couple different points, on having difficult conversations, on being able to address folks that are in heated positions and passionate and emotional and high emotions, etc. But that's in both worlds. I deal with that in my day to day as I do on the basketball floor. So there are so many similarities. Like I said, it's almost like a natural fit of being able to dive into a legal ruling, just like diving into the rule book to understand the differences in pass interference or goaltending or flagrant one and flagrant two fouls. Those differences and working in the gray, I've improved based off of my day-to-day job, and officiating has definitely helped me in my legal career. They've definitely been mutually beneficial.
So you're on the court, Jeff, and you have to choose between the spirit of the rule or the letter of the rule. And once you make that decision, how do you stay confident in that decision to just keep moving forward with what you've decided?
The rule book and the rules will always back you up. They're always defendable. Ultimately, there are scenarios where we can play in the gray and we have judgment. Ultimately, if we look at scenarios that get people in trouble, it's they're operating outside of the rules framework because the rules are a defense for us. Now, to your point, Josh, there is a lot of gray. There's a lot of gray from core judgment plays, traveling out of bounds, etc. One of the core examples here is there's a bang bang play with an out of bounds call, and there was a potential foul before the out of bounds play, but you're not going to call the foul and you're just going to call the out of bounds and give it back to the team that was fouled, that was offended. So that's an art gray play, right? Where by the rule of the law, you missed a foul call and you potentially got an out of bounds play incorrect. But in the live game play, no one's going to say anything because you're giving the ball back to the team that was initially offended. There's no possession consequence, for example. In today's world with video, you have the rule book behind you and someone's going to videotape something and say, you missed this play, and then you missed the back-to-back out of bounds call. And that has changed some of the philosophies all the way up to the Division I level and all the way down to the grade school level, when any parent can be sitting there with a cell phone and videotaping that Jeff or Josh or Justin made 5 incorrect calls, and here are the 5 calls. Although I'd love to say that you have some buffer area to play in the gray as much as you did 10 years ago, you don't. So the point to take away there is, in scenarios where you have rules defending your actions, you're golden. You can always point to the rule and quote the rule and move on. And in areas where there's some gray, it depends in how far someone's willing to push the limits. But ultimately, the areas that we have to focus on are what's defensible. And if there's video evidence showing that you're incorrectly calling plays, what's the possibility that you're going to remain on staff? Or what's the possibility that someone's not going to email someone saying, hey, check out these plays that were called incorrectly? It's definitely moving more towards the black and white. Again, knowing the rules and knowing that you have that backing is going to help you survive some of those situations.
You've worked with a major virtual platform where communication and precision are everything. What lessons from that world carry over to your officiating?
When I first started coming up, one of the lines that everyone used was "silence can't be quoted," and I really like that. If I don't say anything, no one can quote me and misquote me, right? And I look at how technology has grown, the virtual platforms have grown, what we're on today. Everyone has to be knowledgeable and basically cognizant of what they're saying, what they're doing, what they're saying, and what their surroundings are. Like I mentioned before about cell phone video or parents in the stands or coaches, etc. Those building blocks like that I took to heart, like the silence can't be quoted. Short and sweet. You have two ears and one mouth for a reason. Are all steadfast philosophies to live by, especially in today's world. And you look at a communications platform, you look at tech companies, everyone wants to move fast, but moving fast and making mistakes is ultimately making yourself slower. And if you look at your trajectory, if you look at tech companies, et cetera, having PR people, social media policies, like everyone's focused about what you're saying and what platform you're saying it on. Officiating is really no different. What message are you sending? Statement wise, what communication styles do you have with coaches, et cetera? What's your verbal, nonverbal communication style like, et cetera? And does it match the platform that you're on? That's a really important point to make is, understanding what type of official you're going to want to be or want to become, it kind of rests on like what type of official are you today? A lot of people can fake it and make it with poor judgment, but sooner or later it's going to catch up to them. And the same goes with communication and how you present yourself on social media, how you talk with coaches. Are you using slang? There are so many different areas of communication, and you could probably have your own podcast every week talking for an hour on communication styles and how to improve communication on the floor and in your day-to-day life, et cetera. I would just point to, if you look at the best of the best, if you look at NBA officials, you look at the top officials in the NCAA and WNBA, they know how to present themselves, make a statement, and move on very concisely, succinctly. And that's understandable by someone that has a PhD and someone that may not have gone to college or high school. And that is a value that is underappreciated at the high school ranks and when you're improving your schedule year over year. But if you can figure out the communication aspect and how you present yourself and what's your social media presence, and you perfect all of that, everything else is easy. So that's the hard stuff nowadays, is to manage everything on your presentation, communication style, all the off the court issues that you see a lot of people have. If you manage those today, you're golden.
Jeff, you talked about starting out your career in the rec leagues, and you've progressed to the point where you officiate at some of the highest levels currently. What's one lesson or perspective that you could give officials across that spectrum, just given that we have members just starting out in those rec leagues this year and people that have aspirations to get to those higher levels? What could you provide to those officials?
When I first started out, I took how hard officiating was for granted. I remember, we were in rec leagues, you're calling a game, and I was with one of my really good childhood friends working a game, and we were screwing around. We weren't necessarily taking it serious. And a coach after the game came up to us and said, you guys need to take this seriously. You need to be registered with the WIA. And, never really thought anything of it. And so we registered and went through, the process of having our athletic director at the time at the high school sign the card for us that we had to mail to the WIA to get registered. That action in and of itself, I think was an action that made it serious. It made us take it seriously. Even individuals that I work with at the Division I level will say, yeah, I'm traveling here. I don't really care about this game, or who do we have tonight, as a joke. And those folks that don't take it seriously and realize that even though I may not be working 85 games like some of the big timers, I walk onto the floor and there's a coach that's making a couple $100,000 to $1 million that's going to take that game pretty seriously. It's a mistake by a lot of people to not consider, in whatever venue you are, from a third grade rec gym to a varsity game to a small college game to a Division I game, that there are some individuals that rely or put a lot of importance and stake in that game. And like I said, I made the mistake early on by not really caring and not really thinking that there was really anything to this. And taking it seriously is it's tough. It's tough for someone in 8th grade to say, I'm going to take a second and third grade rec game seriously. But if you think about those kids, someone made a joke always, it's for the kids. This is all for the kids. I helped coach my daughter's 4th grade basketball team at her school, right? And we'll always laugh every once in a while because everyone's volunteering and it gets long, and it's hard coaching 4th grade girls and trying to get their attention. But we always joke around, it's for the kids. This is for the kids. And really, that taking it seriously aspect, I think, is super important. And again, there's different shades of that color, but it is one piece that I feel like if I would have had someone maybe say that to me more seriously when I first started, like that coach did after a year or two, it would have gone a long way. It's the same type of advice that guys working Division I will get. If they're not in it, if they're not putting in the time and the effort, there's someone else that's going to take that position from them. That goes a really long ways.
Jeff, is there an example of something you've recently learned from a mentor, evaluator, or peer that changed the way you officiated, or was something you wish you learned earlier in your career?
We had a situation last year regarding a monitor review. And when we initially first started talking about resting on the rules, et cetera, there was the one point of advice was if you get an opportunity to do something that you think is an area of improvement that you need, do it. Try everything you can do to go and get that experience. And just recently with this monitor review, we had never had this situation before. And The three of us got together, we're talking about it, and it resonated then, where the light bulb went on, thinking, oh crap, if I would have done two or three things, over the past 8 years, I could have been more comfortable in that situation. I could have known exactly what to do without having to conference, look at the monitor, maybe more than once to try to get something correct. But I look back to when I first started out and working freshman and JV ball when I was in high school. At that time, I was thinking, because I wasn't playing high school at the time, freshman games, JV games are easy. I don't need to still work that eighth grade game or those 3 or 4 eighth grade games in that tournament on Saturday because I'm working JV games already. But that a piece of advice of like, get the experience. You need to see crazy plays. You need to see plays that you've never seen before. You need to see parents that are off the wall crazy that you need to throw technical fouls out and deal with stuff. You have to deal with crazy scenarios in order to feel comfortable in other crazy scenarios. That experience goes so far. There's a lot of guys, even in the WBOA and in other associations across the state, that think I'm not going to do this game because I'm already working a full varsity schedule. And that would push them to second guess that decision, right? To push back a little bit and say, is there an opportunity for you to work some games and see things that you've never seen before? And is that a learning opportunity for you to consider it? And the light bulb went off when we had that scenario where I was thinking to myself, if I would have worked 2 or 3 other games, I probably would have seen this in this type of scenario. Or during the summer, if I would work a few more summer league games, I might see a scenario that I've never seen before. It's invaluable to be able to say, like, actually, I know this rule because it happened to me 2 years ago, and this is how we're going to adjudicate the play. I feel like if you pulsed a room full of officials, that would be a very popular response to that type of question is to get as much experience as you can and to use that as your backdrop to feel comfortable in areas of uncertainty.
You gave us some really great advice earlier for officials at any stage of their career to really just take it seriously. If we look just at the high school game now, break it down into 3 different groups: somebody just breaking into the high school scene, somebody doing an active varsity schedule, and then somebody maybe that's been around for a long time, a veteran official. What advice would you have specifically to those 3 groups of officials?
The person that just breaking in is what I just talked about, is gaining as much experience as possible, work with as many different people as possible, be uncomfortable, put yourself in uncomfortable positions and see how you break out of those positions. And that goes a ridiculously long way. Like I said, to building up your confidence, building up your book of experience, and basically being a true leader on the floor. Someone that's been doing high school for quite a while, looking for the next break potentially, or just comfortable in their position of officiating at the high school level, even those officiating their position, at like the 8th grade level or 6th grade level and not looking to advance. Those are the areas where come mid-season, I feel like I'm in a position where things just get mundane. It's the same stuff over and over and over again. And you get I don't want to say you get bored, but you can lose your mind a little bit on the repetitiveness. And for those folks in that category, you have to try to find that next area to focus on. And whether it's a mechanic that you think you're screwing up on and you want to focus on things during a lopsided game, etc., you have to go in with your crew with a few goals in those games, whether it's mechanics, whether it's I'm going to make sure when I'm reporting to the table, I am loud and people understand what I'm doing. For the few high school games that I saw last year in person, there's always areas for improvement. As that type of official that may be comfortable where they are, you have to try to find some sort of mindset for continuous improvement. And then for the last bucket, and I think Josh, you referenced this as more of someone that's moving up or trying to get to the state tournament level, right? For that bucket, it's truly accuracy and play calling. An area, even for my own benefit, when I look back at like what areas or what times that I feel like I grew the most as an official or improved the most, or I saw a situation and I really put the chalk to the chalkboard and did some work to try to figure out why I screwed something up. There's a ton of video review now. And that's huge on trying to take the next step or be the best of the best. Secondly, you truly have to dive into the rule book or the case book. Try the case book once if you feel like you look at the rule book more often, and read through plays, because there will be plays in the case book that you have never thought about. I'd like to think that I know, but you'll still read one and you'll be like, oh, you know what? That's right. I kind of forgot about that. And I think those areas that we kind of have to dust off those books that are in our library in our head, is super valuable and helps you continue to have that mindset of like, I'm going to do XYZ to be the best official in this room, or the best official in my association, or the best official at the state tournament this year. Those are not huge earth shattering things to try to accomplish, but they are things that when I look back at when I was improving, or when I felt like I was improving and growing the most, those are things that I valued the most. Looking back, that helped me get to that next level. That helped me get the championship game. That helped me get hired in my first college conference. They may be small factors and small steps, but you need those small steps to take one big leap.
Jeff, for officials balancing professional careers and officiating growth, what's one mindset or practice that helps you stay intentional about improvement?
It's tough. Life is tough. Family life, managing family life, work life, and then officiating and being gone 2, 3, 4 nights a week is really hard. Everyone still has to have their priorities of putting your family first, a job second, refereeing third, fourth, fifth, wherever it is on your list of priorities. We just had a couple losses in our officiating family, and it really makes you think about your life, your family. What happens if I got injured tomorrow and I had to give up officiating? What else is there in my life? And there's a lot of people that put officiating above other areas of their life that they shouldn't. There are other portions of their life that suffer because of it. So, I try to make a point of saying, if I'm going to work 3 nights a week or be traveling for games 3 nights a week, I am going to be home those other 2 nights. There will be nothing that takes me away from picking my kids up from school, or dropping them off in the morning. So I will make sure that I make the time to be there with my family and my kids. So it's really important for folks to make sure they manage their schedules. Block what you need to block to take care of your family and your home life, because officiating doesn't care. If you're gone tomorrow, there's going to be no one asking, where's Jeff Lewis? Why is Jeff not on this game? Because they're focused on coaching that game, and players are focused on playing that game. Everyone has to readjust their priorities a little bit. Yes, I know officiating is important to a lot of people. It's important to me, but it's not as important as my job, and it's not as important as my family. Sometimes people lose those priorities, so they lose the order of importance. But I'd say, in terms of day-to-day work, I will commit to things for officiating that I know I can commit to, but I would never sacrifice my job, my livelihood to try to make a game. It's not worth it. So on that list of your priorities, manage your schedules accordingly, manage your business at work and manage your business at home, and they should all work out. But if something is out of whack, take care of your family and work first, because officiating is most people's secondary or third thing to worry about, and it's not their primary job. So it's a really good question. And I've gone through some ebbs and flows over the years. I had a really close coworker that passed away in 2018, and I really readjusted how I thought about traveling for work and traveling for basketball, etc. Recently, it happened again, where you lose someone that in the officiating community, and you kind of take a step back and say, like, what is it? Like, if I get injured and officiating's done, like, I still have to be a family man. I still have to go to my day-to-day to make ends meet. It really forces folks to focus on their priorities and their family and their work-life balance. As I was talking with someone today, like, I would miss officiating if I ever had to give it up, because I love it. It's not what's paying my mortgage. Right. My wife would be very happy if I said I'm not working 3 or 4 nights a week working basketball, but we make it work. It's my push to everybody is, it sounds easy to just say, make it work, but focus on your priorities and you can make it work.
He's Jeff Lewis, 2018 NCAA Division III Final Four, a legal mind, sharing lots of nuggets for balancing all the things that are important as officiating is, have perspective of where we're at and where we're going. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you both for having me.
For Josh Mansky, I'm Justin Marion. Until next time.